Solomon makes reference to the dog. It struggles to lift its head. You kind of feel like that. It's this intense heat and so forth just kind of takes something out of you, and that's even at the beginning of the day. Anyway, Frank, thank you for mentioning the rain and everything. Let's continue to pray for rain, even though it may not be in the forecast. God has a way of working those things out on His time schedule, and without necessarily consulting the TV weather guys. So uh, we'll continue to pray for rain, pray for a break in this temperature. I think the next day where the highs stay under 100, I'm going to do something to celebrate. But it's like, wow, gee, how wonderful. Anyway, pray for those things. Pray for protection against wildfires. Pray for those who've been victimized by fire. I just feel badly, so badly for the folks out in Hawaii. If you look at the aerial shots of the island, it looks like somebody dropped a bomb on it. It's just devastating. And also pray for all those families who've been affected by the fires in one way or the other. I think the death toll now has been up to 89 or something like that, 93, and it's probably going to continue to climb before everything is done. So uh, let's be in prayer for those who are affected by these really horrendous situations. Let's now turn back to our lesson, and we're continuing our study of Daniel, a chapter a week through the summer. That's been our project. We are now up to chapter 11. And as you know, the back end of Daniel is concerned with prophecies and visions that Daniel encounters. Four major dreams, four major visions that Daniel has. In fact, we're looking at the last one right now, and actually, it's this particular vision is covered in the last three chapters. Chapter 10 was kind of a prologue, kind of, sort of. Last week we read where Daniel had this very troubling dream, this revelation, and it just troubled him so much that he prayed about it. He prayed for something like 21 straight days. uh, Lord, what is this about? What are you telling me? That kind of thing. And on the 24th day, this what Daniel initially describes as a man appears in front of him. Of course, we know that he's more than a man. He's a supernatural being. I'm probably not too much of an error to call him an angel, but he's a messenger from God. And he essentially says, "Hey, I would have come sooner, but there's been some spiritual warfare going on. The prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. I had to deal with that. 21 days, gee, that also is the same amount of time that Daniel was praying. Kind of gives you an idea of, gee, what if Daniel had not been praying for 21 days? Kind of reminder that yeah, God listens to prayer and prayer matters. So that's why we pray for things such as the things that we just mentioned. Anyway, this being gives Daniel strength because Daniel is just fainting dead away, uh, and so he says, "Hey, take courage, get some strength, stand up, be strong now." And finally, at the end of chapter 10, he says, "Do you know what I've come to you? Actually, my spiritual battle, my spiritual work is not done. I'm going to have to go back and take care of Prince Persia, but and then when I go, the Prince of Greece will come. But first, I will tell you what is written in the Book of Truth. I, essentially, I will tell you of things to come. I will your revelation has something to do with that, and I'm going to explain, at least in a very broad term, what it's about." So, verse 11, for some reason, whoever decided to or made the big decision to divide Daniel into chapters makes this division here when it probably should be like the concluding verse to chapter 10. Um, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I took my stand to support and protect him. That's in parenthetical. So our real passage of study picks up on verse 2. And verses 2 through 4 read like this. Now then, I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will arise in Persia, then a fourth who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king will arise who will rule with great power and do as he pleases. After he has arisen, his empire will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 winds of heaven. It will not go to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others. 3 verses, and yet there is so much to unpack here. So we're going to stop and we're going to fill in some blanks here because uh, something means something here when you're reading prophetic literature here. And what we're looking here is the revelation that's been given to Daniel in the short term covers at least almost 4 centuries of events in the future, which is which is quite a span. Uh, and let's start off with verse 2. 3 more kings will arise in Persia. Remember, Daniel is where Daniel is serving is no longer the Babylonian kingdom. The Babylonians have been conquered by the Medes and the Persians. And eventually, the Persians, well, this is a kind of a weak partnership. Eventually, the Persians will dominate that partnership. So that's the reference to where the kings come from. They'll come out of Persia. Um, in chapter 10, we find that Daniel is still in the 3rd year of Cyrus. That's the first king of the new realm, the new rulers. The angel is telling Daniel that 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and then a fourth. Who is that fourth king? Most folks say, yeah, that's kind of sounds like Xerxes. Or if you want to be really, really formal and use his full name, it's Artaxerxes. Have we met this guy before? Yeah, we think so, because this Xerxes is probably very much the guy who was in charge during the events that are recorded in the book of Esther. He's the one who gets upset with his queen, basically exiles her, holds a contest to have a new queen, and out of all that, Esther is picked. And from there, we get into all these events. Xerxes' BFF is a guy named Haman. Haman gets upset with a guy named Mordecai, and Mordecai's Jewish. So Haman says, you know what? I'm going to take out my anger not just on him, but on all the Jews. And he tricks Xerxes into signing an edict or a law that cannot be repealed, as we have seen with, in chapter 6, Daniel and the lion's den. The king issues this decree that, hey, let's kill all the Jews. And that was courtesy of Mr. Haman. And of course, God intervenes in his own way, and the treachery is figured out thanks to the courage of Esther, and the Jews are able to defend themselves. In fact, because of all those events, a unique holiday for the Jewish folks emerged. That's Purim. Anyway, that's in a nutshell is this fourth king. Xerxes has other things to do besides the events of Esther, according to this prophecy. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece, which basically is a growing contender at this point in the realm of world empires. Who wants to be the ruler of everyone around you? Well, the good folks ruling Greece said, we'd kind of like to take a chance at that. And For whatever reason, Xerxes, either he's fearing this threat by the Greeks, or he just has this running feud with the Greek government. Goes to battle. It turns out he picked the fight with the wrong guy, because by the time everything, uh, Persia and Greece are fighting, the Greeks are led by a guy named Alexander the Great. You've heard of him, I'm sure. What do we know about Alexander the Great? Well, very little, but what little we know, all we need to know. Very great warrior, very great military tactician. He knew how to fight and to win. He basically overthrows the Persians. He conquers the Persians. He conquers everyone else. He conquers everybody around him. So for a time, the Greeks become the greatest ruling empire in the world. And oh, coincidentally, this is in fulfillment of an earlier prophecy that God gave through one of the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. Anyway, about Alexander the Great, who we think this person is being alluded to in verse 3, a mighty king will arise. He'll rule with great power and do as he pleases. And after he is arisen, his empire will be broken up. Well, why? What happened? This happens just when things seem to be just going your way and going the way you would want everything to go. Something happens. Something happened to Alexander, who at the age of 32 died very suddenly. Now, some folks, and I saw one historian say this with a straight face, that Alexander the Great, the cause of his death was he died of a broken heart because there just wasn't anything else left to conquer. Yeah, right. More likely is the fact that he went to a big party one night. Lots of liquor was served. It was probably Lone Star, maybe Coors Light. I don't know. Anyway, he drinks. He has his fill and then some. He winds up dying suddenly, and the suspected cause is alcohol poisoning. But here he is, dead at 32, at the peak of his power. Apparently, he didn't leave a succession plan. He had three sons, he had three heirs, but apparently they're just not up to taking over what dad started and what dad accumulated. And you see that even in family businesses. Dad puts together this dynamic company and family enterprise, and he's so proud of it, but he has nobody to leave it to because the the children want to go do something else. According to according to the history, according to legend, Alexander the Great's sons, basically there were some problems here. One was mentally deficient. Others maybe could have run the country, but they just really didn't know what to do. Maybe the other one, well, I'm kind of into my poetry and wind chimes, and I'd like to stick with that. And it doesn't matter because there are some folks with great ambition who arise in the vacuum and say, we'd kind of like a shot at running this empire. And so they murder Alex's sons, and then they take over, or one tries to take over the others. There's a civil war, and the outshot of that is that instead of one big empire, it's like, okay, let's call a truce. We'll split up and we'll have four smaller empires, and everybody will be happy because there were four generals that were battling this thing out. So that was the truce, that was the settlement. Okay, you don't get the whole enchilada, but you get part of it anyway. So uh, again, that fulfills the prophecy here that we're seeing here in verse 4. Alexander's empire is broken up. It's parceled out toward the four winds of heaven, meaning did not go to his descendants. It goes to essentially four people that we never heard of up to this point and never heard of again. It didn't go to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others, i.e., the four generals who battled in the vacuum of his death. Very interesting point, or a little story about Alexander the Great and the Jewish people. And this comes from a historian by the name of Josephus, and he's highly regarded. He is basically anything that Josephus has written, people just basically take to the bank with them because it's regarded as accurate and without bias or prejudice. Josephus, in his accounts of the Jewish people, records an episode where Alexander the Great visits Jerusalem. And he goes to the temple, and he goes to the temple to see the high priest, a guy by the name of Jaddua. And this is sometime at some point where Daniel, the story of Daniel, has made it into the scrolls that are part of the what we call the Old Testament scriptures. Well, anyway, Jaddua takes out the scroll that has Daniel, rolls it over to where this particular prophecy is, what we now call chapter 11, shows it to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, if he knew Hebrew, reads it, or perhaps maybe this was translated into Greek by now, or he has it read to him. But when he hears it or reads it, he says, "That's me. I'm that guy. I'm that guy who's conquering the world." And he is so pleased with that that he grants autonomy to the Jews. And in other words, hey guys, I like you so much. I may conquer you, but I'm not going to make life miserable for you. You can continue to live as you see fit. Do whatever you want to. I'm not going to try to run your lives. And not only that, after I conquer you, you won't have to pay any taxes to Greece for 7 years. Such a deal. So, for at least a 7 year period, the Jews and the Greeks were Jake. They got along great. So that was an interesting little story, especially when we start seeing what is to come down the road. Now, the next section of the prophecy, there are sometimes when you see online the occasional sermon that's preached about chapter 11, the guy will say, I just, there's just not time in this sermon to try to detail it to you. And in fact, if I try to detail it to you, all of us here will leave the room with a big headache. So I think probably what I should do, the best way to handle this, is to read the next several verses. I'm thinking probably through verse 20. I'll just read it. You sit back, listen to it, let it flow over you, and we'll come back and fill in a few highlights of things that really matter. But picking up at verse 5, and this is where the Greek Empire has now been split up into four kingdoms. For lack of a better term, they're known as the kingdoms of the north, east, south, west. But the prophecy concerns two kingdoms, the kingdoms of the north, the kingdom of the south. Why? Well, okay. What is the kingdom of the north? Well, it's basically what we would think of as today as Syria. The kingdom of the south is what we would think of today as mostly Egypt. Gee, I wonder what land or what nation lies between Syria and Egypt. Could that possibly be Israel? Ah, so that's why this prophecy focuses on these two particular kings and these kingdoms, because of what they're going to do will have a material effect on the land and the nation of Israel. Uh, there's the kingdom of the west and the east, as far as we can tell, but they're off doing their own thing. So don't worry about the lack of any reference or references to the king of the east and the king of the west. They just really aren't major players in this prophecy. But picking up on verse 5, the king of the south will become strong, but one of his commanders will become even stronger than he and will rule his own kingdom with great power. After some years, they will become allies. The daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to make an alliance, but she will not retain her power, and he and his power will not last. In those days, She will be betrayed together with her royal escort and her father and the one who supported her. Verse 7, one from her family line will arise to take her place. He will attack the forces of the king of the north and enter his fortress. He will fight against them and be victorious. He will also seize their gods, their metal images, and their valuable articles of silver and gold and carry them off to Egypt. For some years, he will leave the king of the north alone. Then the king of the north will invade the realm of the king of the south, but will retreat to his own country. His sons will prepare for war and assemble a great army, which will sweep on like an irresistible flood and carry the battle as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south will march out in a rage and fight against the king of the north, who will raise a large army, but it will be defeated. When the army is carried off, the king of the south will be filled with pride and will slaughter many thousands, yet he will not remain triumphant. For the king of the north will muster another army, larger than the first, and after several years he will advance with a huge army, fully equipped. In those times, many will rise against the king of the south. Those who are violent among your own people will rebel in fulfillment of the vision, but without success. Then the king of the north will come and build up siege ramps and capture a fortified city. The forces of the south will be powerless to resist. Even their best troops will not have the strength to stand. The invader will do as he pleases. No one will be able to stand against him. He will establish himself in the beautiful land and will have the power to destroy it. He will determine or set his face to come with the might of his entire kingdom and will make an alliance with the king of the south. And he will give him a daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the kingdom, but his plans will not succeed or help him. Then he will turn his attention to the coastlands and will take many of them. But a commander will put an end to his insolence and will turn his insolence back on him. After this, he will turn back toward the fortresses of his own country, but will stumble and fall to be seen no more. His successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor. In a few years, however, he will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle. So much there. And so many names and so many dynasties and so many descendants of the original rulers and so forth. There's Ptolemy the first, there's Ptolemy the second, there's Ptolemy the third and the fourth and the fifth. If I were to try to outline and name everybody for you, you just get a headache and start saying, John, enough with the Ptolemies. Just Ptolemy how it all comes out. So, uh, what follows is a big fat summary, long story short, of what we have just read. Because, gee, John, it sounds like all they did was just go back and forth fighting each other. Short answer, yeah. That's pretty much what goes on here for several generations, if not centuries. Uh, go back up to verse 6. Um, it does, things kind of start out with kind of maybe good intentions. Yeah, let's hey guy, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Let's let's make a pact and live together. Let's make an alliance. Oh yeah, okay. Well, okay. You want your daughter to marry my son, or you want my son to marry your daughter? Whatever. And they flip a coin, whatever. But verse 6, the where we read that the daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to make an alliance. That's pretty standard operations. Hey, I don't want to fight with your country, and I'm sure you don't want to fight with me. Let's make an alliance. And how better to make an alliance when everybody becomes an in-law, right? So someone marries someone else's daughter or whatever, and things are theoretically copacetic. This is what was planned by a guy named Antiochus II. He was already married, but no problem. Hey, Leah, do you say, honey, uh, don't worry about making supper tonight because we're getting divorced, which is exactly what he did. Puts her away. and marries a lady by the name of Berenice from the other kingdom. And life is good, we think, except that for whatever political issues come up, the arrangement falls apart. And Antiochus takes back his original wife. So things should be good, right? Well, not quite. It seems like Laodice is carrying a big grudge about being put away, maybe shut up in that closet or in the ex-wife house on the premises. Anyway, she arranges to have Antiochus poisoned. We don't know how it was. Maybe it was dinner one night, and they're kind of making small talk, and Antiochus says, honey, there's something about this wine. It just tastes a little bit off. His final words before he craters over and, dead. Not sure how it happens, but he's poisoned, and she doesn't stop there. She takes Berenice, her infant son, by Antiochus, and her entire court, basically the courtesans who wait upon her, and she has them all put to death. And from there on, it just goes downhill. It's one battle after the other. The king of the north mounts a battle against the king of the south, and it's back and forth, back and forth. One king wins one year, the other king wins the other year. When you read it, it kind of reads like one of these great football rivalries. Who will take home the old oaken bucket this year? And and on it goes and goes and goes. Uh, the interesting thing is that when you go back and look at the actual historical events, which we're not going to do, they track what the prophecy says here. In fact, they track so precisely that there's a minority report among some of the Bible commentators who say, you know what? I just think someone was fooling us on this passage in Daniel. We don't think Daniel really wrote this because no human being could come up with a prophecy this precise where everything comes true. What we think happened was someone came along later on after all this had occurred, wrote up what they said was a prophecy, and stuck it back in the book of Daniel and claimed it came from him. As I say, that's a minority report, not held in high regard. And, whoever argues this does have a point. No human being could possibly come up with prophecy and this detailed and this accurate. Those of us of a certain age may remember this professional prophet by the name of Gene Dixon. And the big deal about Gene Dixon was, oh, everything she's prophesied has come true. She prophesied President Kennedy's assassination. She prophesied that Winston Churchill would lose this big election to be turned out after the war. Da, 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 da. And that sounded great. She sounded so formidable until somebody started checking her actual prophecies and the track record. Wasn't quite 100%. In fact, I'm not even sure she made if she was on a scale, a grading scale, I don't think she would even made a D. She would have flunked because there were as many prophecies that she made that did not come true. In some cases, the opposite occurred, or just nothing happened at all. So, yeah, human prophecy, nobody could have done this. Daniel couldn't have done it. No other human being could have done it. God did it. And just remember, the prophecy is coming from God. Well, the significant thing of all this back and forth, by the time we get to verse 20 or 21, is the tax collector, basically this guy who's briefly in charge, is a guy by the name of Seleucus III. He is the son of, and they're up into the multiple names, son of, son of, son of. He's the son of Antiochus III. So he's in charge, at least for a little bit, but he doesn't last very long. Apparently, he is assassinated by his brother, whose name is Antiochus IV. Gee, we've talked about him before. Yep, he's rearing his ugly head again here. And in fact, the next few verses that we look at are going to talk about who we believe to be today, Antiochus IV. This guy who is destroyed, who's in charge but destroyed, as noted in verse 20, he will be succeeded by a contemptible, a vile person who has not been given the honor of royalty. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will seize it through intrigue. Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and a prince of the covenant will be destroyed. After coming to an agreement with them, he will act deceitfully. And with only a few people, he will rise to power. When the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He'll plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time. With a large army, he will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south. The king of the south will wage war with a large and very powerful army, but he will not be able to stand because of the plots devised against him. Those who eat for the king's provisions they eat his delicacies, will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away, and many will fall in battle. The two kings, with their hearts bent on evil, will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail, because an end will still come at the appointed time. The king of the north will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. He will take action against it and then return to his own country. At the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Ships of the western coastlands will oppose him, and he will lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his fury against the holy covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the holy covenant. What is this all about? Well, this is all about A4, Antiochus IV. Antiochus IV, who had a high degree of self-confidence and a really good opinion of himself because he named himself Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Epiphanes standing for illustrious, glorious. And the Jewish folks initially side in with him because in his initial behavior and initial campaigns, he kind of sort of showed favor to the Jews, helped them and so forth. And so the Jews said, hey, A4, you're our good friend. We'll help you out. And so they did. Now, as time went on, certain things are going to happen where their opinion of A4 changes. And over time, they have a new name for him. They make a slight modification to that name he gave himself. He's no longer Antiochus IV Epiphanes, but Antiochus IV Epimanes, meaning madman. We'll get into that why, but in our closing comments, we're going to leave A4 and the Jewish folks in a certain place where we're going to have to pick up. A4, as noted in the prophecy, wheedles his way into power. He murders his brother. He doesn't gain the position legitimately. He does it by force, and then he charms people by deceitfulness, by knowing the right thing to say at the right time, and so forth. So initially, things start off very well. Even the Jewish folks like him. Then, as he mounts these constant back and forth battles with his enemies over in the south, things change. Things change. He wins some, and he loses some. And he loses one very important battle with the king of the south. That's referenced over in verses 29 and 30. And what happens is this battle goes on and on and on, but Antiochus IV is ultimately defeated in his second battle against the king of the south, which is Egypt. And this time around, the reason Egypt is able to defeat Antiochus the Fourth is because they had a little help from their friends, a little empire by the name of Rome. I said, Roman Empire, can you come over and help us? We want to take care of this guy once and for all. And I kind of suspect at this point in time, given the aims and the growing power of Rome and its government, asking them to come over and help is like asking the local mafia to come over and help with your business. One day you wake up and it's not your business anymore. But hey, Rome is only too happy to help, especially in terms of its long term plans of world dominance. And the story is told at the end of the battle in which Antiochus's forces are soundly and roundly defeated. The Roman general, the victorious Roman general, draws a circle in the sand around Antiochus IV. And he says, buddy, before you step out of that circle, you're going to tell me what you need, what you have decided, and what you need to decide as to whether you are going to surrender and pay tribute to Rome. And there's always another choice. You can make the plan B choice, but the plan A choice is you can step out and keep breathing. Plan B, if you don't surrender, hey, you don't step out, you get carried out. Well, Antiochus IV makes the practical choice since he's outgunned and outnumbered. Okay, I surrender. And from then on, he's a tool of the Roman Empire. Is he happy about it? No. Now, he gets to keep a lot of the stuff, a lot of the swag that he's accumulated in battle. It's kind of like when you watch these old game shows, the contestants that lose, they don't get the grand prize, but, the master of ceremony says, what do we have for departing contestants today, Johnny? And Johnny says, from Spidell, the ultimate in jewelry. And, you know, so he got to keep his swag, but there's this little matter of humiliation. And A4 does not like to be humiliated. A4 is really cheesed about this, and he's going to take out his frustration, his anger on somebody. Guess who that somebody is going to be? And at that point, we're going to have to end our discussion here because we've run out of time. And it's a long chapter. And there's still a lot to unpack with the rest of chapter 11. So, but if you would, please read the rest of chapter 11 and also read chapter 12 because good chance that we will be wrapping up our study of Daniel next Sunday or in 2 Sundays, depending on how much we get into detail. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you enjoyed discussion and got something out of it. Please, as we discussed earlier, keep praying for rain. Keep praying for a break to this very, very hot weather. And pray for those who've been affected by the wildfires. Take care of yourselves. Drink plenty of water. Stay hydrated. And stay out of the sun as much as you can. And Lord willing, we'll all meet back here next Sunday. Thanks a lot.